Okay, and as you know, this webinar is devoted to the memory of Professor Anne Monius, who is also one of the authors of the book. I believe this may have even been her last publication, her last article. Anne died unexpectedly on August 3rd, 2019. And this was a very sad moment for all of us who knew her, her friends, her colleagues, the entire academic community. We just want to take a few minutes to remember Anne's life and also to talk briefly about her chapter in the book. Of course, we invite you to read the book, and especially her chapter, in the book. So Anne was born on February 17th, 1964. She did her undergraduate degree at Harvard in 1986, and she completed her MA and PhD in South Asian Studies or Religions in 1997. She was a professor at the University of Virginia from 1997 to 2002. And in 2002, she joined the University of Harvard, the Divinity School, where she stayed and where she worked in a very devoted way until her death in 2019. Her research interests lied primarily in examining the practices and products of literary culture to reconstruct the history of religions in Tamil-speaking South Asia. She's the author of a forthcoming monograph, I'm not sure whether it's already out or not, on the formation of Shaiva religious identity in Tamil-speaking South India, under the title Singing the Lives of Shiva Saints, History, Aesthetics, and Religious Identity in Tamil-speaking South Asia. She's also the co-editor of Original Communities of Devotion in South Asia, Insiders, Outsiders, and Interlopers. This book appeared in 2019. It was published by Routledge. And her earlier publications include Imagining a Place for Buddhism, Literary Culture and Religious Community in Tamil-speaking South India, Oxford University Press, 2001. She's also the author of numerous articles and book chapters, and everyone who knows her knows how devoted she was not only to her research, but also to her students, to her teaching, and she will be remembered and deeply missed. Her chapter in the book is chapter 2, which presents an in-depth study of the role of the bodies in the work of the 7th century Tamil Shaiva poet saint Tiruna Vukarachar, more affectionately known by Tamil-speaking devotees of Shiva as Upper or Father. It is noteworthy that Tiruna Vukarachar was known to have loaded his own body. And Monius argues that Upper's poetic oeuvre is remarkable for its particular attention to those unfortunate characteristics of the human body, which account for it being always distracted by the senses in which have doomed it to perish. She holds that a close examination of the poetic works attributed to Upper reveal complex ideas of human and divine bodies. Monius concludes that Upper's poems invite their audiences not to ignore or reject the body, but rather to reconsider it in multiple ways in search of liberation. I would like to ask you to observe a minute of silence just to honor the memory of Professor Anne Monius. Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Professor Nandi Bhatia, who is a professor at the University of Western Ontario.
Thanks, Diana. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. And really a privilege and a pleasure to be here, and lovely to see some of the people I'd already met and to meet everybody. So I'd like to introduce Diana. Diana, who's taken this great initiative in organizing conferences every year, and she's so active that I have a great admiration for her, and for putting together this collection of essays. So Diana Dimitrova is Professor of Hinduism and South Asian Traditions at the University of Montreal. She obtained her PhD in Modern Indology, Classical Indology, and English and American Studies at the University of Heidelberg in Germany. She is the author of 4 monographs, 32 articles and book chapters, and the editor and co-editor of 5 edited volumes. Her recent publications include Cultural Identity in Hindi Plays, Poetics, Politics, and Theatre in India from Oxford University Press, Hinduism and Hindi Theatre from Palgrave, and the edited volumes Rethinking the Body in South Asian Traditions, which is what we are talking about today. And then also the Other in South Asian Religion, Literature, and Film Perspectives in Otherism and Otherness, which came out from Routledge in 2014 and then paperback in 2017. She's currently serving as the series editor of the Routledge series on South Asian culture, and is recording secretary of the Canadian Society for the Study of Religion. So please welcome Diana, and thank you, Diana, for introducing the book now.
Thank you so much, Nandi, for introducing me in such a nice way. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So I would like to begin by first introducing generally the book, what it is all about, before I give the floor to each author to just talk about their own research and their own chapter. Of course, this will not replace the book, so we really hope that you can read it, but we just want to give you a spoiler, like Chris said, just to intrigue you into the book. So the volume Rethinking the Body in South Asian Traditions studies cultural questions related to the representations of the body, human perceptions and attitudes toward the body in religious and cultural contexts, as well as the processes of interpreting notions of the body in religious and literary texts. It explores important issues related to the human condition of being in relation to one's body, at times in terms of processes of embodying, and at times through processes of othering the body, and yet at times through processes of being marginalized and othered or discriminated against on the basis of the body. Thus, the focus is on studying the embodying of the divine bodies of the divine other, as well as the phenomenon of mythologizing and othering through the body in religious, cultural, and ideological contexts. From a phenomenological perspective, questions linked to relating to the other need to take into account the notions of dharma, moral and religious duty pertaining to one's class, stage in life and gender, varna, class or caste, gender, and the concepts of purity and pollution in South Asian traditions. The questions related to gendering the body, for instance, the violation of female bodies and the polyvalent character of the bodies of hijras, play an equally important role in the volume. The book, which represents both insider and outsider perspectives, comprises 7 chapters that explore questions related to the body from the 2nd century CE up to present day in both North and South India. And the authors discuss the issue from interdisciplinary perspectives by means of textual study and ideological analysis, by means of anthropological analysis, and by means of phenomenological analysis and the methodology of philosophy of religions. The chapters in this collection respond to multiple questions related to our interpretations of the materiality and at the same time transcendence of the body, as well as human beings' relation to it. Is the body the other to the mind? And are Hindu discourses of the body informed by Hindu discourses of otherness? This is one question we'd like to ask. Furthermore, what is the cultural meaning of the body? of mythologizing and othering the body today? What are the ideological implications of the creation of human embodiments of the divine, such as gurus, political figures, auspicious third gender figures or hijras, and others with regard to religious and cultural identity and the legitimation of power? How does the representation of the body reflect the power structures of contemporary societies in South Asia? And how is the notion of the body instrumental in marginalizing members in society or even entire religious groups? What is the relation between body and gender? Finally, how do the mythologized bodies of divine figures empower the human beings who represent and embody them? What is their significance for the empowerment of women and other minority groups? What are the responses of those who have been empowered or of those who have been marginalized in this process? And how are those constructed notions of mythologized and other bodies shaping and reshaping our collective imaginations through religious and literary space? Thus, the chapters approach the questions raised from the perspectives of discourses of the body, ideological criticism, and theories of myth and gender studies. And I think that all these questions are best answered by inviting the authors to talk about their research. And so without much ado, I would like to invite Professor Christopher Austin to talk about his research. And Chris, if you allow me, I would like first to introduce you. Like Christopher Austin is an associate professor of religious studies at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. His principal areas of research are in the Sanskrit epic Mahabharata and its appendix, the Harivamsha, early Vaishnavism, and the narrative traditions of Krishna's life. He's the author of a monograph on Krishna's son, Pradyumna, lover, magician, and scion of the Avatara, which appeared in Oxford with Oxford University Press in 2019, and a translation of a late medieval Sanskrit play, the Pradyumna Abhyudaya of Ravi Varman, a new Sanskrit text of the Trivandrum edition and English translation, which appeared, which was published by Harasovets in Wiesbaden in 2019. And his earlier work focused on the Mahabharata. He has published numerous articles and book chapters, devoted, related to various aspects of the South Asian religions. And it's our privilege to have Chris here and to invite him to talk about his work in the book.
Okay, thank you so much, Diana. I do have my phone here, and I'm gonna turn on my stopwatch and just keep my eye on that for 5-minute deadline for myself. Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you for having us. And it's lovely to gather together again and see some wonderful faces from the conference. So, I think likely everyone knows already that this book was the result of a conference in Paris, and it was lovely to be invited. And I guess what I'll say about my chapter is that as it sometimes happens that Diana very kindly and generously invites me to a panel or to a volume and on the theme such and such, and my typical first response tends to be, I don't know if my work right now is sort of, lined up with that theme. And then she'll say, well, this is in Vienna or it's in Paris. And then I say, I'll come back to you and I'll think about how to make it work because I want to come in. And so I was very grateful to have the opportunity to really think about the body. So I would not say that I'm someone who does research on South Asian religions and the body. It's such an important and developed topic with such a literature. And so my main interests up until that point had been in Pradyumna, in the son of Krishna, and his grandson Aniruddha, and various features of these mythologies around Krishna and his descendants that I'd been pursuing with a concern around Krishna Bhakti, around various gender dynamics of South Asian religions, and basically the invitation to put that into the context of the framework of the body really permitted me to see something that I hadn't seen before about these narratives. And just, in about 90 seconds, I'll try to encapsulate it. in the stories of Krishna's life, in the Harivamsha, and in the stories around the men in his family, there's a very conspicuously frequent motif of men being abducted and held hostage, which seems very strange in this military culture where normally men just either kill each other or they abduct women and make women the stake of their posturing and so on. So the abducted male was this theme that I've been concerned with. And the invitation to think about that in relation to the body was wonderful, because it allowed me to see that the concern around abducted men really has to do with this is the argument of my chapter, with a certain model of patriline that comes from the Vedic tradition, according to which every member of the patriline, the grandfather, the deceased great-grandfather, the living father, the living son, really forms a unit, a corporate body that is very precarious. It has to be maintained through ritual forms and shraddhas, and Mathieu may even possibly talk about shraddhas in connection with his work as well. And so, in brief, the need to maintain a patriline through ritual forms creates a certain anxiety over the failure of male offspring and over the failure of ritual forms such as the Shraddha offering. And I saw that at work in the stories of Krishna's life and those of the stories of his son and grandson, because what I realized is that when you threaten a single member of a corporate body, you threaten the entire body. So that if the son is endangered and there's a prospect of a failure of the following male generation, the entire patriline is endangered. And so in various ways that I develop in the article, I pursue this notion that the Harivamsha is concerned with the lineage, the Vamsha of Krishna as a corporate body, and it rehearses through these anxieties with images of seizure, abducting these young men, holding them hostage, having a sort of heroic intervention to free them up again. And really what the smoking gun, if you will, for me, is the fact that Krishna's grandson is named Aniruddha, which means unobstructed. And so I tried to develop this theme of abducted and seized males in connection with this motif of a corporate patriline. I think that's probably, if I say any more than that, I'll have to talk for about 45 minutes, and I certainly won't do that. So I just want to thank Deanna again for prompting me to sort of put my research into this conversation about the body, and I was very happy to make a contribution to this book, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what some of the other authors have to say about. I read your pieces, of course, but it will be nice to hear refreshers on your chapters and to take questions afterwards. So thank you, Deanna.
Thank you so much, Chris. Actually, all thanks to you, right? And it's a wonderful chapter. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And also for being so succinct. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I would like to invite now Professor Stefania Cavalieri to speak about her research and her chapter. If I may introduce you briefly, Stefania. Stefania Cavalieri is an assistant professor in Hindi language and literature at the Department of Asian, African, and Mediterranean Studies at the University of Naples, L'Orientale in Italy. And she did her PhD in Indological Studies at the University of Turin, which was followed by postdoctoral studies. And her main fields of research are classical Hindi court poetry, Indian aesthetics, and the role of Hindi literature in the reconstruction of early modern Indian intellectual history. Among her publications, there are several volumes, for example, Moonlight of the Emperor Jahangir's Glory, critical edition and English translation of the Jahangir Jasa Chantrika by Keshav Dasa. The edited volume, Guru Mala, in honor of Shyam Manohar Pandey, which appeared in 2012, and numerous articles and book chapters related to the field of South Asian studies and South Asian traditions. So it's with great pleasure that I would like to introduce and invite Stefania to talk about her contribution to the book.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you very much for organizing this webinar and as Chris was saying before, for inviting me to the very inspiring conference that during which we met in Paris a few years ago, and after which we published this book. We worked together to this project. I will try to be as short as possible, but I will not be as short as Chris. I'm sorry. I prepared a few slides. I would like to show you. I will share my screen. I will try to be as short as possible. Let's see. I also, when he was mentioning the timer, I also did it, but I don't know. Let's see. First of all, I hope you can see my screen. First of all, I would like to say that as it was for Chris when you invited me to participate in this wonderful project about the body, I thought it was something a bit distant from what I was saying, but finally it was a very inspiring source to think in a different way about what I was doing. And finally, it was, I think, a very interesting key to rethink about the work I was doing, the book I was working on, that is this Vigyana Gita Pai Shabdas. So finally, thanks to this, thanks to this reflection about the body, I found a way to into these studies about body, the body, the perception of the body in the West and especially in South Asian traditions, because there are the discourse that is done in the book I talked about in my chapter is exactly about the body and his relation with the mental faculties, because we can see that in the South Asian tradition, rather than having an opposition between the mental and the physical sphere, we have generally different degrees of materiality. And despite the differences of opinion concerning the ontological status of these mental faculties, Hindu discourses generally represent the body as a body-mind continuum, encompassing both gross physical constituents and subtle physical faculties. So this is exactly what the work I was doing talks about. So I saw, and here I try to move, that within all these discourses about the body, I could find a way for my own discourse, because mainly the discourse in South Asian scholarship concerns the relation between this body, the body, and its relation with the self. So we have this continuum psychophysical and the self that is the ultimate reality. So we should always consider this non-oppositional relation between body and mind. And we should also consider the peculiar status of the body that has some kind of homologies between the self, the individual, and the world, so the microcosm and the macrocosm. So reality manifests itself through different bodies that interact in a various way. And if you can see the important studies made by Holtridge about the body in religious tradition in South Asia, we can see that she attributes to the human body the function of mediating between mediating transaction among the order of things of the world, that is the cosmos body, the religious sphere, and the social body. So the body has a very important position in classical South Asian traditions. And we can see it in different texts. We have texts like the Vedic Samhita, the Brahmana, that are especially concerned with the ritual body. Then we have the philosophical texts like the Upanishad, in which we have a special attention to the ascetic body, so the body that has to be overcome to reach the final release. And then we have the Dharmashastra, so the treatises that are mainly concerned with the body that becomes a tool for the social harmony and the equilibrium of the society. So in this picture, I found another interpretation that is the perception of the body in allegorical texts, like the one I'm working on, that is the Vijnana Gita of Keshav Das, that is a remake of the classical allegorical drama in Sanskrit called the Prabodha Chandrodaya of the 16th century. Very briefly, this book, this text talks about the word, internal word that oh my God, it's already 5 minutes, I finished. This book talks about an allegorical world that happens inside the mind, that is the body-mind continuum. And in this book, we can see many different interpretations of the body. I wanted just to give you a couple of examples, but maybe you will have the time to read the book and see and hopefully you will enjoy. We have different aspects of the body. The body is the body of the heretics that are considered like the other, to be separate and unlawful and what is improper. So we have, for example, the description of a Kapalika Shaiva or Jaina monks, fake ascetics. Then there is a very interesting description of an heretics that is a man dressed like a woman, so is a kind of drag queen before the time, that thanks to the meditation techniques abandons his physical body to acquire a kind of mystical body that makes him become woman, like a beloved of Krishna. And then there are other kind of perception of the body up to the final idea of the book, that is a kind of reinterpretation of the body, of the Adva, of the Vedantic conception of the body as what has to be abandoned to get released, but in a kind of new social political agenda, because the text is addressed to kings that have to be very present in the world. So finally, the body becomes also the means to overcome the limits of the body. And get release, get the final liberation, the Jiva Mukta, being present in the world and in their own body. So it's, I try just to, I made a sum up of the chapter. I hope we will have some time for discussion, and otherwise I leave you the book, and I hope you will enjoy the chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stefania. This was fascinating. Apologies that you cannot present more, you know, that we should read it, right? Exactly. So if you could please stop the sharing of the screen, yeah? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Fascinating. Thank you, Stefania. And I would like now to invite Professor Nandi Bhatia to present her contribution. And if I may introduce you briefly, Nandi Bhatia is a professor in the Department of English and Writing Studies at the University of Western Ontario, Canada. And her research explores the connections between literary and theatrical practices, nationalism and colonialism, and examines the ruptures and crossovers that resulted from the British Empire's long-standing engagement with India. Such connections have been analyzed in her monographs, Acts of Authority, Acts of Resistance, Theatre and Politics in Colonial and Post-Colonial India, which was published by the University of Michigan Press and Oxford University Press in 2004. Another monograph, Performing Women, Performing Womanhood, Theatre, Politics and Dissent in North India, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2010, and many edited collections, for example, Modern India Theatre, which has become the staple in the field, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2011, and a co-edited volume with Anjali Geraroy, Partitioned Lives, Narratives of Home, Displacement and Relocation. Professor Bhatia is also the author of many articles and book chapters. And I would like also to mention that for her research, the Ontario government awarded her the John Charles Polanyi Prize for Literature, and she has been named University of Western Ontario's Faculty Scholar, which is a great honor. So we're honored to have you among us, Nandi, and I would like to invite you to present your research.
Thanks, Diana. And I just want to say I agree with Chris that Diana, when she invites you and you say, you know, I said, oh, I'm not working on this, she helps you make new connections. I don't know, she invites you in such a way that it's hard to refuse, and, you know, one is forced to find new connections, and one always does, so that's great. So my paper is about bodies in fiction about the 1947 partition of India. And I just want to start by saying that in a special issue of World Literature today, Sarah Wilson points out the vast interpretive possibilities that representations of bodies in literature provide. Such representations range, but are not limited to fashion and the body's accoutrements, to bodies policed by governments, cared for by families, destroyed by warfare, teased because of political views, and spurned by lovers. As such, they become crucial sites for framing narratives that reflect, comment on, and disrupt cultural norms that function as disciplinary mechanisms. So the representation of bodies has also acquired a prominent place in critical analysis of literature about the 1947 partition of India. Several critics have examined women's bodies as sites for the enactment of community, religious, and patriarchal violence, sites that bear the trauma and tragedy of partition and speak to its hidden history. This is because in literary stories about the partition, bodies of men, women, and children are central, like traumatized bodies. What is the significance of foregrounding these bodies, especially women's bodies, in fiction? On one level, it is to bring attention to the scale of violence that broke out at the time. According to Urvashi Butalia, during partition, 75,000 women are thought to have been abducted and raped by men of religion, either different from their own or perhaps from the same religion. Thus, she notes that for women who were abducted and then rehabilitated through the state's recovery programs, it was their bodies that became a paramount concern. Now, because of the scarcity of survivors' testimonies, literary texts provide stories of ordinary people's experience of partition and of eyewitness accounts of violence. So in my chapter for this book, I analyzed Bapsi Sidhwa's novel Cracking India, which reveals how cultural nationalism during partition came to be enacted through the evocation of a religious discourse that identified the enemy in corporeal terms, that is, in terms of their bodies. For those unfamiliar with the novel, I will just provide a very brief summary. Set in Lahore and told from the perspective of Lenny, it is centrally the story of Aya, Lenny's caretaker, who is abducted during the partition. Aya's story occupies the epicenter of the novel because she is adored by Lenny, her family, and all the servants with whom she hangs out. As the violence escalates with the impending partition, Aya is abducted by the men she thought were her friends, in front of Lenny's family members. That this is narrated by Lenny is significant. It reflects the loss of the child's innocence as Lenny comes to confront the nexus of religious politics and bodily violence. The novel ends with the search and recovery of Aya by Lenny's grandmother, and then I once found Aya is sent off to Amritsar to join her family. So most critics find Sidhwa's recollection of her memories of partition violence in this text as supplementing the research on women who survived abduction and rejection from their families. The scholarly focus on nationalism and religious sectarianism alone, however, leaves out other forms of violence that partition histories need to acknowledge. One in which class and domestic violence also has an important role to play. And again, it's done through a focus on the body in Sidhwa's text. So to this end, I analyzed the novel's ambiguities that only hint at other hidden forms of personal violence enacted behind the closed doors of familial spaces. I suggest that the ambiguities are important narrative strategies that point towards the gaps and unanswered questions that both Lenny and the adult narrator of the novel have about unspoken forms of familial violence. So in gesturing towards the workings of a threatening form of masculinity in hidden realms and justified in the name of either nation or community or religion, Sidhwa's text interrupts histories that occlude the partition's personal dimensions. And that's my paper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nandi. So interesting, fascinating, and thank you for being so brief. We appreciate it. Thank you. And I would like to now give the floor to Mathieu.
Yes, and I would like to introduce Diana Dimitrova to present her own article. She doesn't need to be introduced because Nandi has made such a good job at the very beginning of the webinar. So Diana, please.
Thank you so much, Mathieu. And I feel like I'm taking too much time because I also introduced the introduction to the book. So I'll be extremely brief. I think 1.5 minutes, I'll do my best. My chapter deals with yoga, bhakti, and pilgrimage in the Radhaswami tradition. So devotional bodies and embodied devotion. And I just wanted to say that the article studies the notion of yoga and bhakti in the tradition of Radhaswami of the 19th, 20th, and 21st century. Radhaswami, for those of you who do not know, is a devotional tradition and which challenges and transcends traditional Hinduism in multiple ways. And I analyzed the role of the body in Radhaswami ritual practice, which involves elaborate meditational practice known as Surat Shabd Yoga, yoga of the sound of the inner current. I also focus on the annual pilgrimage to India of Radhaswami members who live in North America in order to practice Surat Shabd Yoga together with their fellow satsangis in India, and to have darshan of their guru, electronic darshan via the screen. I seek to explore the complex links between body yoga and bhakti and pilgrimage, and I discuss embodied yogic meditational and devotional practices, such as the practice of the collective meditation during the satsang, and also which represents devotes the same time basically a mental pilgrimage across the globe, not only in terms of conventional practices of the yoga system vertically, but also horizontally across the globe in order to be with the fellow satsangis in India. I study elements of Radhaswami religiosity, which invite the devotee to long for a darshan of the divine guru and encourage followers to meditate on him. And I also discuss the concept of arti, which in this is in the practice of Radhaswami is a nirguna, non-manifest waving of the lights, and which represents an internalization of ritual worship. And thank you so much for your attention. I don't want to talk any further because I don't want to take away the precious time from my other colleagues. And with much further, I would like to now invite Professor Gita Pai to present her research. And Gita, if you allow me to just introduce you briefly, Professor Gita Pai is, excuse me. Professor Gita Pai is an associate professor of South Asian history and director of international studies at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, and she has several book projects coming. The first one is a manuscript which is titled "Architecture of Sovereignty: Stone Bodies, Colonial Gazes, and Living Gods in South Indian Temple," which deals with the Meenakshi Sundareshwar Temple in Madurai. And the second one is In Pursuit of Dancing Shiva, the history of India's iconic cultural treasure, which is a book-length study on the history of the Hindu god Shiva in his dancing form, in which explores the medieval period bronze statue as a ritual element and article of devotion in South Asian temples. She's the author of multiple book chapters and articles related to South Asian studies and research. She's a historian and South Asianist, and it's a privilege to have her here among us. I would like to invite Professor Gita Pai to present the chapter.
Great. Thank you so much, Diana, for that kind introduction. I should say that the first book that was a project when I submitted that bio, will now be published by Cambridge University Press, hopefully in June or July of this year. Let me just do this. Okay, so this chapter explores 4 case studies in the US and India from 2002 to 2016. Let me start my timer. Centered on utilizing human figures in the guise of Hindu gods in print media advertising. It examines the responses of South Asian religious organizations when multinational companies employ the image of a Hindu god for promotional purposes, but the god in question is actually a human being. Using the body of an often famous individual in visual representations conveys a tenuous relationship between that divine body and the actual physical body of the real person being portrayed in contemporary media culture in what I call a mediated body, a body that has been modified and manipulated digitally to appear like a Hindu divinity. Using image search engines and employing digital tools has made possible the mediated transformation of the material body into a Hindu deity for marketing aims, which subsequently offends some devotees. The first 2 case studies center on representations of Shiva in his dancing form called Nataraja. Kohler Company, a US distributor of plumbing products, featured a bikini-wearing woman as Shiva Nataraja wearing the traditional Cambodian headgear of dancing divinities as seen at Angkor Wat. In its ad for the October 2002, the New York Times Magazine. American Hindus Against Defamation protested, stating, and here I quote, "Just as a scantily clad image of Christ in the shower selling fixtures would be offensive and evoke strong resentment in the Christian community, this advertisement image has enraged the Hindu community. Hindu deities are worshipped. They are not exotic images to be distorted, mutilated, and abused." 8 years later, American magazine Newsweek featured on its October 2010 cover an image of US President Barack Obama appearing in the god's cosmic dance by balancing on one leg, elevating his other leg across his body, and holding various items denoting policy issues in his many hands. Universal Society of Hinduism President Rajan Zed asked how a mortal could be depicted as Shiva, who is the director of our destinies. The last 2 case studies focus on the Hindu god Vishnu, who appeared in print media unrelated to religious matters. On its April 2013 cover, Indian magazine Business Today featured an image of popular Indian cricket captain Mahendra Singh Dhoni as a multi-armed blue-toned Vishnu holding various consumer products that the athlete endorsed. A Vishwa Hindu Parishad member in India filed a petition against the cricketer, stating that his depiction as a god hurt the religious sentiments of Hindus. And Fortune's January 2016 cover featured Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos as a blue-hued, vermilion-adorned Vishnu holding a pink lotus and gesturing in a yogic pose, his palm emblazoned with the Amazon logo, for an article about his plan to conquer India's trillion-dollar market. In response, Indian-American blogger Anil Dash tweeted, "Okay, cool, Fortune magazine. Now do one with Bezos as Jesus in honor of Black Friday." While these companies represented, when these companies represented humans as Hindu gods in print media, they favored certain corporeal choices, and I discussed those choices in detail in the chapter. And the rest of the chapter then explores what accounts for the protests and the ethno-religious mobilization against the use of humans as Hindu deities beginning in the 2000s. But I will end with this image, which is an earlier pre-2000 example of using humans as Hindu deities in commercial venues. And it is the 1967 cover design of guitar legend Jimi Hendrix's record-breaking album, Axis Bold as Love. It was inspired by Hindu devotional motif. The cover displays Vishnu's various manifestations with the band members' 3 heads replacing those of gods. While it would become a best-selling poster, there was no organized protest against the image in the 1960s until 2014, when the Malaysian government's home ministry banned and confiscated posters of the album cover art after Penang Hindu Association objected to their sale. And I will stop sharing. Yes, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Gita. It was a wonderful presentation, very interesting, and thank you for being brief. I appreciate it. And I would like now to give the floor to Professor Mathieu Boisvert to present his research. And if I may introduce you briefly, Mathieu Boisvert is a professor of religious studies at the University of Quebec in Montreal, UQAM, where he has been teaching various courses, graduate and undergraduate, on South Asian traditions for many years. He's also former president of the Canadian Corporation for the Study of Religion, and he's also the founder and director of the Centre d'études et de recherche sur l'Inde, l'Asie du Sud et sa diaspora, located at UQAM. His principal areas of interest are South Asian pilgrimage, and more particularly the Kumbh and Magh Melas of Allahabad, the articulation of religion and politics in India, and gender studies in South Asia. He has also worked extensively on South Asian and Southeast Asian communities in Montreal. He has recently published Le Hijra, Portrait socio-religieux d'une communauté transgenre sud-asiatique, with press of the University of Montreal in 2018. And he was one of the main editors of the edited volume L'Inde et ses avatars, pluralité d'une puissance, which was published by Presse de l'Université du Québec in 2013, among many other articles, book chapters on various fields of South Asian traditions, religions, and cultures. So it's our great privilege to have Mathieu among us and to invite him to talk about his chapter in the book.
Yes, thank you very much, Diana. So the chapter is on Hijra, which is very different from the Narivesha that Stefania talked about, these drag queens. And it's a result of a research that was led with other scholars, and Karen Bates is with us today. And in the book that was hinted by Diana, Karen has a chapter in there on access to justice for Hijras, and another scholar, Isabel Wallach, who's also working on aging. And the chapter here in Diana's book is really a synthesis of my research on the Hijra community that was led in between 2014 and 2017. And what I tried to put forth here is the way that Hijras are using samskar, and more particularly women samskar, these rites of passages, in order to construct themselves this female body that they want to acquire. And the way, the correlations I make here is, I look at different samskar that they have within the Hijra community that are very important for them, like the Rit, which is the initiation ceremony. And during the Rit, Hijras, they officialize their guru. And the guru, it is like a wedding to the guru. And as you know, Hijras are very ostracized within Indian society. They are practically reniés, left or pushed away from their family. So they reduplicate the kinship, symbolically the kinship model. And in a way, with the Rit, you know, they officialize this lineage, this sasural lineage, with their guru, and with the guru of their guru, and the other disciples of their gurus are their guru behen. Okay? So this is one of the rituals. Another one is nirvan, the castration, and especially after castration, there's a 40-day seclusion period, which can be correlated to the seclusion or the impurity period that women undergo usually after they give birth. birth, or to another ritual that is related to the first menses of a woman at puberty. And this is where I make the link here to the menses ritual. Because after this 40-day seclusion, they undergo another ritual that Hijra called themselves God Barai, and it's a big celebration. And God Barai for female, it's when usually it's when they become pregnant, usually at the 5th or 6th month before they give birth. Okay, so it's a huge celebration within the Hijra community. And another ritual that comes usually later on in their life is called Dud Pilana, the breastfeeding ritual. And what is very interesting here is through that ritual, each Hijra or the Hijra undergoing this ritual with their Dud Mata is symbolically recreating the Maika kinship line, parampara, to a certain extent, that she has been forced out when she became a Hijra. So there's this recreation of both Sasural and Mayaka lineage through these rituals that Hijras are appropriating, if I may say. So that is in a crux what I tried to get at in my article. So thank you very much. Thank you, Diana, for giving me the opportunity to participate to the book and to this panel.
Thank you so much, Mathieu, for presenting your research. Fascinating. Thank you so much to all authors for sharing their ideas and their insights with us. I greatly appreciate it. And I would just like to now open the floor for discussion. Thank you so much to all colleagues and students for being here, to our audience. Please feel free to ask questions. If you have any questions to the authors, our request is just not to ask the questions via the chat, but please directly, it's easier like this. Please, we welcome your questions. Any questions? I guess we said it all.
Diana, I certainly don't want to take up the question period if there are questions from the audience. If you can see, and so please shut me down if there's a hand coming up. I don't want to. I do have a question for Mathieu. If there are no...
please go ahead, yeah.
Mathieu, I'm fascinated by this idea of generating a family lineage between people who are not biologically related. And in Tantra, I'm sure you know, there are ways in which the initiate is brought into the family of the parampara of their guru, and which involve sometimes fairly literal biological substances being transacted that kind of make the initiate into the son of the guru and his consort. So there's a very rich vocabulary of ritual creation of offspring from Tantra that sometimes, of course, has a transgressive origin or is symbolically enacted. So, are these rituals that in the Hijra community, does it appear to you that they draw on tantric systems of initiation, or do they appear to be really ingeniously sort of novel ritual creations that are kind of just subversively, reusing the traditional Hindu samskaras?
Well, I think that it's primarily the female samskar that they are using, but more and more, like with the Hijra community, they're not necessarily celibate, but they're not giving birth. So more and more we see an association with ascetics, with sadhus, not necessarily tantric ascetics, but mainly with akaras. And we've seen in the last 6 years, now there's a Kinnar akara, that tried to join the Kumbh Mela and that were recognized not as a 13th akara, but rather as a member of the Juna akara. And they can go for Shahi Snan during the Kumbh Mela. So there's this There's this association as well as hijras, as ascetics to a certain extent. So the way I see this is that they use these different rituals to give meaning to their life, to create meaning or to recreate meaning.
Thank you very much. So we have almost exceeded our time. Like one last question before we go. Maybe, yeah, Sarah. Sarah has a question, no, two questions. Okay, we'll take both of them, Sarah and Tessa. So Sarah, please go ahead. If you can just, if we could, yeah.
Yes, can you guys hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. A very interesting presentation, by the way. I'm just a student from RE 101, and I found this really interesting. Because it connected with some of my material from class as well. I just had a question for Matthew as well. I was wondering, are any of the members of the Hijras communities, like, do they associate themselves with the LGBTQ+ community, or is this like a strictly religious thing?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a strictly religious community, but it's a strictly traditional community. So in Mumbai, in Delhi, in big cities, there are LGBT communities, and more, some hijras do not want to be perceived as hijras anymore, but rather claim to have this LGBT identity.
Right.
Okay? So hijra is a traditional South Asian identity.
Okay.
Which is changing extremely rapidly nowadays.
Okay,
thank you. And Tessa, your question, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering, where do we access like the Zoom webinar after we finished our meeting?
Okay, yes, it will be possible to, maybe Paul, you can say something about that. Like it will be recorded, and there's a YouTube channel on the Canadian Society for the Study of Religion where you can just access the channel. I believe it's not only for members, it's open to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, so thank you so much to all for being here, for presenting. Thank you to the authors, thanks for the audience, and thanks to Professor Paul Garel for being here, for taking care of all the technical details so we can enjoy this beautiful conversation. We really appreciate it, and thanks to the Canadian Society for the Study of Religion for giving us the platform to talk about our book. And as I said, the book is available, so please go ahead and read it. Yay, thank you. Thank you so much.